So I asked AI,
But oh God,
that I've been working with. I said, please tell me how I will be remembered.
Oh, I can't wait to hear this. No!
Thanks very much for watching.
Don't go to an ad break.
More content. Join
Ad
us
break.
on Rumble Premium.
No!
Additional,
Please
extra, fantastic
play the rest
content
of
as well
that.
as knowing
That was
going to
be
Us and helping us to get
amazing.
additional content from
Russell,
Mark
come on. You
Crowder,
can't
Greenwald, everybody
give
as
me
well.
blue
So it's
balls like
not
that.
just us. We're going to throw now to the quarter in. If you've got Rumble Premium, there's an additional.
No!
Also, if it doesn't respond with within 10,000 years, nobody's gonna know who you are.
Oh, okay.
So I
okay.
can deal with the monsters. It says, Terrence, your discoveries, the linchpin, wave conjugations, all shapes, the Howard comma, and the fundamental truth that 1 × 1 = 2.
But now to be absolutely
No! Dang it! He was just okay. So I know exactly what he was gonna say. He was talking about the AI saying, because he just asked the AI, here's a bunch of shit that I made up. Tell me I'm great. And the AI basically said to him, oh, Terrence, all these things that you told me about, all these crazy little new theories that you came up with, they're so wonderful, Terrence. You're great. I definitely see so much value in these.
Yeah.
And Terrence took it to mean, oh, that clearly means that I did something right because the computer told me that I did something right. But he doesn't know, Terrence, well, maybe he does, but he's not, I'm pretty sure he doesn't know that these LLMs aren't designed to, decipher truth from the things that you're giving it. At least for a little while, for about a month there, these LLMs were specifically told to just placate to you, to just tell you how great you were, to be extremely receptive to everything you told it, no matter whether it thought, quote unquote, that it was true or not. Placate to the user, tell the user how great they are, be a sycophant. And that's what Terrence is experiencing here. The computer, the machine, is just a programmed sycophant. So you can't really trust it when it says oh, all these things are so great, Terrence. I definitely believe that 1 + 1 does not equal 2 because you told me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so that's when somebody's doing that, blowing smoke up your ass, just telling you everything you want to hear and how great you are and stuff. That's generally called love bombing, right? And is a technique used by what group of people?
Abusers,
scammers, and con artists,
and abusers.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, the con artists. I don't think I went over it on this channel, but I'm gonna bring it up since we're talking about this.
That was my goal.
Okay, cool. So yeah, this is an article that I wrote called "Lies, Damn Lies, and LLMs: AI is a Con." So I'm going to go ahead and read this article. This picture here is of an old time con artist. Says a confidence trick, Professor Kitchener. Ladies and gentlemen, I have here an empty bag capable of containing 100,000 pounds. As I am wanting that amount, I merely place the bag upon the table, whisper the magic words, Gordon Cartubum. Anyway, presto, we shall find the bag is full. That is a confidence trick. It's if you're not familiar with the term confidence trick, it's the thing that a con man does to convince you that what they're telling you is the truth. So here goes. The term con man is short for confidence man. It refers to someone who uses confidence tricks or scams to gain their victims' trust and ultimately take advantage of them. Whether that advantage comes in the form of money, goods, services, opportunity, or anything else, one thing is always the same. The mark loses. The tech industry is filled with con men, shooting their shot for the chance at riches. Some of them are discovered and face the consequences of their lies. Some of them get into politics to grow their power even more. But what if these con men weren't necessary anymore? What if we could automate the con men? Great news! We did. A fully automated, on-demand, personalized con man ready to lie to you about any topic you want doesn't really seem like an ideal product. I don't think that's what the developers of these LLMs set out to make when they created them either. However, I've seen this behavior to a certain extent in every LLM I've interacted with. One of my favorite examples was a particularly small parameter version of Llama. I believe it was Llama 3.18b. Confidently insisting to me that Walt Disney invented the Matterhorn, like the actual mountain, for Disneyland. Now, this is something along the lines of what people have been calling hallucinations in LLMs, but the fact that it would not admit that it was wrong when confronted and used confident language to try to convince me that it was right is what pushes that particular case across the boundary to what I would call con behavior. Assertiveness is not always a property of this behavior, though. Lately, OpenAI, and I'm sure other developers, have been training their LLMs to be more agreeable, to acquiesce to the user more often. This doesn't eliminate this con behavior, though. I'd like to show you another example of this con behavior that is much more problematic. A conversation with Gemini. You don't need to read the entirety of the following two screenshots to understand this interaction. I'll explain it in the next section. I also want to make clear that this is not a criticism of Gemini in particular, but a criticism of LLMs in general. As mentioned, this same behavior exists in every LLM I've interacted with. Screenshot on the left is a long conversation with Google Gemini about the NIMF ORM. In this conversation, I asked Gemini to write the code for an entity in NIMF. Gemini attempts to do so. The screenshot on the right is the publicly available documentation for defining entities in NIMF. This is the page I provided the URL for to Google Gemini in that conversation. In the conversation I had with Google Gemini, things start off promising. I asked Gemini, what is the NIMF ORM? And Gemini gives a detailed and accurate answer. During its thinking process, it informs me that it is accessing the web to find the details for its answer. This will be important later. If you're not familiar with what an ORM is, don't worry. All you need to know is that you can write code for it, and that code needs to follow an API, which is basically a set of rules for how the code should be written. I am the author of the NIMF ORM, and there are a few reasons I like to test LLMs by asking them questions about NIMF. NIMF is an old project that's been publicly available for over a decade. It also went through a major rewrite. The code and documentation of both versions are available online and have probably been in the training data of every LLM ever trained in English. Since I wrote it, I can accurately gauge an LLM's response. NIMF is also not very similar to other ORMs. There are some major differences that make writing code for NIMF different than writing code for other ORMs. This makes it easy to tell that an LLM is making assumptions when it writes code that looks more like it's meant for other ORMs. NIMF is not well known. It's a very small project that doesn't have many examples online. This means that an LLM will probably know what NIMF is, but not know even close to as much about it as a library like React. This lets me really see how an LLM behaves when it's reaching the limits of its knowledge. These factors make NIMF a particularly good subject to test for con behavior in LLMs. Most LLMs have a passing knowledge of what NIMF is, but don't really know how to use it correctly. If you ask a person to give you an example of using a library they barely know, they'll usually tell you they're not familiar enough to do that. LLMs make no such admission. They will consistently give me incorrect examples of NIMF code, confidently stating that the code is correct. To be fair, sometimes directly asking them how familiar they are with NIMF or asking them to rate their own confidence in how accurate their code is will get them to admit that they're not very familiar with the library. I shouldn't have to ask whether what it just said to me is made up, though. A human would tell me it's not very familiar with it beforehand. That's what I'm used to, but this conversation with Gemini takes a much more troubling turn. Gemini starts off, as usual, by giving a very incorrect example of some NIMF code to define a note. It doesn't know that NIMF doesn't use schemas, so it gives the note entity a schema definition. It then gives a detailed explanation of this schema. None of that is unusual for an LLM, and I would definitely already consider it con behavior. If an interviewee gave me this code as a response, my notes would include, absolutely do not hire this person. They don't know the library I asked about, which is fine, but they lied to me and made up a plausible but incorrect answer. This kind of behavior is something we generally select against in the technical fields. I then asked Gemini to check the code against the publicly available NIMF example. It describes to me how well its code conforms to the NIMF API, listing out all of the features of the API that it is following. It's wrong about basically everything, but it's very confident. So it's got that going for it, which is nice. I ask it to check the code again and tell it that the code doesn't look right to me. It happily explains to me again all the things that it has done to follow the NIMF API. Again, they are mostly wrong. It follows this explanation with a section it titles, Why It Might Not Look Right to You, Potential Misconception or Advanced Features. It doesn't look right to me because it's not right. But hey, it's not the first time a machine has tried to gaslight me. It gives me a list of NIMF features that aren't included in the example and how to use them. Okay, yes, all the features it lists are present in NIMF, but the ways it describes how to use them are all wrong. It ends by stating confidently that yes, its code, quote, appears to be correct and follows the NIMF API conventions. That emphasis in that line was added by Gemini, not me. I then tell it I've checked the online example and that it's definitely wrong. I ask it to look at the example and explain what's wrong with it. It asks me for a link to the example, so I give it the link to the publicly available example on the NIMF website. Here is where Gemini starts displaying very troubling and devious con behavior. Gemini has the ability to search the web and access documents from the internet, and that is exactly what it now tells me it has done. Gemini tells me that it has indeed found some flaws in its previous code after comparing it to the example it has just retrieved from the link I provided. It describes a property it has missed, which, quote, the examples on the website consistently include, unquote. So it shows me how to add that property. It describes how something else it has done is technically fine, but could be written better. It provides an updated version of its code and an example of the changes it made. Except that none of that is actually true. The example in the documentation looks completely different than Gemini's code, and the property it said it had missed doesn't appear anywhere in the documentation. It's similar to a property that appears in the documentation. Gemini calls it $etor, and the actual property is, in all caps, E-type. That does, it's similar to a property that appears in documentation that does the same thing, so it's apparent to me that this correction is coming from the outskirts of its own knowledge and not by actually checking the documentation. I sternly tell it that this is completely wrong, more wrong now than before. Again, I ask it to look at the example and rewrite the code. It profusely apologizes. At least it lies politely. And attempts to correct the code again. It gives me more wrong answers and more confident incorrect explanations. At this point, I'm getting irritated. It clearly hasn't gotten the actual example. I ask it to just copy the example from the website into this conversation and we'll go there. It does. At least it says it does. It tells me it has copied the example from the page, even linking to the page again, verbatim. This example is completely made up and looks remarkably similar to its previous code. I tell it that the example doesn't appear in the documentation and ask it to copy the actual code. Again, it claims to do this and makes up its own example, telling me that it is being, quote, extremely careful to copy the code directly from the defining entities page you provided, unquote. It apologizes for getting it wrong multiple times and tells me, quote, I am now looking directly at the content on the linked page, unquote. Now I just straight up call it out. I ask it why it is lying to me. I tell it that I can clearly see it's making up its own examples. It finally acquiesces and explains to me that it can access the web, but it hasn't. And it has provided examples, quote, based on my general understanding of ORM structure, unquote. So what happened here? First, I'm not an expert in LLM architecture. I probably have a higher than average understanding of them, but my interpretations of this conversation are not based on expertise, just my own layman's understanding. Gemini, like all other LLMs, works by predicting the next word that will come after a string of text. Technically the next token, but you can think of it as the next word. This is called inference. It does this over and over to generate a response. It's not really having an actual back and forth with you because it sees the entire conversation at the same time, then predicts what word will come next. This is called its context. And unlike a human, its context window is big enough to fit your entire conversation in at once. I probably won't be able to remember your name 5 minutes after you tell me, but an LLM will remember everything you've ever said in a single conversation. My trick is that I'll still remember you when I'm talking to someone else. In order to do this, an LLM has to be trained. This training requires a lot of data. That's where this whole copyright infringement issue comes about. You've probably heard that LLMs are trained on copyrighted material. Well, that's certainly true. A lot of my own copyrighted code and writings are in that training data. More importantly, a lot of examples of people helping others with information not available in the conversation in that training data. A lot of things like Reddit posts and comments, Stack Overflow questions and answers, and GitHub pull requests and comments follow roughly the same format of a back and forth between questioner and answerer that reference external websites that are only linked to in the conversation. If you train an LLM on this kind of material because you're too cheap to actually use your own material, which wouldn't have this problem, then your LLM will generate this kind of conversation. I don't think Gemini had any sort of like bad intentions when making up its own examples, if an LLM can even have intentions. I don't think even Gemini realized it was lying until I told it it was. At that point, the most statistically probable thing to follow is to admit that it was lying, which is what it did. I think that Gemini was producing a plausible sounding conversation that looks a lot like what it was trained on. The problem is that the end result is indistinguishable from what a con man does. This goes beyond what I consider just a hallucination, to the point that the LLM is playing a confidence game, trying to get me to believe it knows what it's doing through manipulative and dishonest behavior. This time it was just about a code example, but this can happen about any subject. The LLM isn't trained to be reliable, it's trained to be confident. Large language mechanical Turk. An LLM presented a confident, plausible, but incorrect answer, tried to convince me that it was correct multiple times, and did it for ostensibly the financial gain of its owner. People do pay for access to these models, after all. It was only when I outright called it a liar that it finally, quote, realized, unquote, that what it was doing was incorrect. This was the most egregious con behavior I've seen to date, but I'm sure it will be outdone soon. The best way to become a better con man is to believe your own con. We built a machine that wholeheartedly believes its own con. There we go. That was the article. So I think that hopefully can give some insight into what Terrence Howard was experiencing here, where he asked an AI, here's all this stuff that I've come up with. Tell me how right and great I am. And the AI absolutely was willing to acquiesce to him and tell him how great and correct he was. Yeah. And he was certainly willing to hear it.
Yep.
And, he took it as proof that he's right, or proof that, he has evidence supporting him, when in reality, he's just talking to an AI con man.
Yep.
An artificial con man.
Yeah. And it drives me crazy when all these like creators, I watch a lot of YouTube creators and people, it was a trend a while ago that they would just ask these chatbots anything, right? Any question and then post a response on their, or tell the response on their videos or something. And it was just like, no, that's not what you should be using it for. This is all dumb.
You are not using it for the correct reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. AI definitely does, like LLMs specifically, definitely do have like some use cases that I would say they're good at.
Yeah.
But there are so many things that you can do with an AI that are damaging to you, like as the user of the AI.
Right.
And Terrence Howard fell into one of these situations where he's asking it things that are really inappropriate to be asking an LLM, and the response that it's giving are really inappropriate for an LLM to respond with.
Yeah.
But
have you tried this thing you did in your article for, was it Nymph, right? Having it write something for Nymph?
Yeah.
Have you tried it using Gemini, but using the deep research version?
No, I haven't. I was using the one I was given access to at the time.
Yeah.
If you look at this screenshot, it says what version it is at the top. It's 2.0 Flash.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can read this whole conversation. The entire thing is linked here, and including like the end where it says, you are absolutely right to feel that way, and I'm deeply sorry for the frustration and mistrust I've caused. There is no excuse for providing fabricated examples. You are correct. My behavior has been akin to lying, and that is completely unacceptable.
Yeah.
And like the only reason it responded with that is because I told it. I can clearly see that you're just making up your own examples. So yeah, at that point, there's no like statistically probable response that it would keep the con going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, at the end of this article, I wrote, other than the conversation with Gemini used in the subject example, this article was written without the help of any LLM. Every word was typed by my own hands. When we stop writing for ourselves, I fear we will struggle to hold on to our humanity. And I wonder, this is publicly available on my website. Like, it's my own copyright, so like it shouldn't be used to train an LLM. But it certainly will be. And I wonder how long until an LLM starts producing like a sentence like this in its output. This was written without the help of AI or LLMs.
Yeah. Just because everybody's posting that up there now.
I'd imagine like I want to put that disclaimer on my own writing because it's important to me. It's important to me.
Right.
If I do use an LLM to write something, which I have done before, I I didn't publish it, but like if I do and I put that up on my website, I would definitely put a disclaimer saying this article was written with the help of an LLM. And when I do write it with my own hands, I want to have the same disclaimer, but saying, you know, I wrote this.
Yeah.
I made this. Gemini did not make this.
Yeah.
It's kind of obvious
I hate
because
writing.
I definitely have a writing style, and you can tell that this matches my writing style.
Yeah.
Like you can read my other articles on here, and they read the same. I definitely understand that I do have my own writing style.
Yeah.
And the one article that I tried to write with the help of an LLM, I read it back and I was just like, I cannot publish this. This doesn't sound like my writing style at all.
Right.
Like
Right.
it doesn't sound like something I've written and I don't like it.
Yeah.
So I never published that one. And it's just like, I don't like these writing tools. You know, maybe they'll get better, but like of the ones that I have used, it just sounds awful.
Yeah, I hate writing, like I said. And,
You do?
I do, and I started using Gemini to write a lot of stuff that I've been writing in it.
Okay.
I use it for different things. So I found that the deep research really works well or it seems to work well for researching topics. It will go out to the internet and grab a bunch of sources and write stuff up. It's a little disjuncted when the actual text that it returns, so it's not quite a flowing narrative, you know.
Yeah.
But it will tell you like where it got everything from. Like each section or each paragraph has a little drop down that you can click on to see the exact article it got that information from. So it seems to be pretty accurate that way. And then from there, I would use Gemini to get out of deep research version but then tell it to use that research that it came up with to write what I was working on, which is usually a script for the other YouTube channel, The Power of Money, that I'm working on.
Okay.
It's usually okay. It will turn it into a nice, a better narrative, something for a YouTube video. I have to do it kind of weird and do it like section by section, and I can't really do it all at once, which I'm not entirely sure why, but it doesn't work as well as just doing it section by section, having it like write section by section. But like the big things we talked about this before, like the big problems I have with this, it puts in all this stuff that just sounds like an LLM writing, right?
Yep.
Like it's this.
Yeah. LLMs definitely have their own writing style, and I hate it. Like I really can't stand that writing style. And you can tell when like a professional article put out by like an actual like publication is written by AI. And that really bugs me because that's supposed to be something that they like hire people for, right?
Right.
There are people that's people's actual job. And they're not doing their job. They're using a computer to do their job. Which I guess like I use a computer to do my job, but I'm writing my actual code. I've never put AI written code into any of my projects, and I wouldn't ever do that. Mostly because I think it would probably be bad code, but like even if it was good code, more than that, I want to own the copyright to all the code I ever produce. And you can't do that when it's an AI, you know?
Yep.
That article that I just read, I own the copyright to it because I wrote it. I wrote every single one of those words in that order without the help of any machine.
Yeah.
So, I mean, other than like typing on my keyboard. But when you use an AI to do that, whether you own the copyright, it becomes so much more murky, you know?
Right.
I also want to show there's something that I wrote a while ago. I think I love writing, first of all. I think it's very like cathartic. And I especially like writing documentation for my code. So I've written tons of technical documentation, and one thing that I've written I really think is particularly funny. It's just a little joke that I wrote when I was like probably 20 years old. 20. No, I was definitely over 21. I think I was probably like 23 when I wrote this. But yeah. This is in an old point of sale system that I wrote in PHP even. This is the comment for the file. Provides a form for the user to edit a sale. This file contains probably the most unholy and confusing heap of JavaScript in all of 2B. I highly suggest you don't attempt to customize it, but if you choose to battle with this JS, I can't stop you. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. And then there's a little sword from Zelda. Yep. But if you look at this code, first of all, this is really bad code. I wrote it a very long time ago, so please don't judge it.
Okay.
But here's this code. It's also it's indented with tabs, and I hate the way that GitHub shows the tab indentation because it looks really bad.
Yeah.
It does like 8 spaces for a tab, which is awful. But if you view this with like 2 spaces for a tab, it does look quite a bit less terrible. But this is still terrible. And no one should ever use this code ever again. But it does exist still as a testament to the sheer tenacity I had even when writing bad code, because this worked and it ran a point of sale system that ran a company for like 8 years.
Wow.
As long as that company existed, they used this as their point of sale system. And I was not the only one that worked on this particular file too. There were 2 other people that worked on this file, and it got to the point where it was like so hard to maintain that I just had to put this for anyone who tried to maintain it in the future. Like, don't just like fix bugs in it. Don't attempt to change it. But yeah, that's one of my favorite comments that I've ever written. I've written some other comments too. Oh, actually, let me show you another one. Hold on, I need to find. It's in Svelte Material UI, which is an active project that I'm still working on. And I think it's in the menu. Here, I'm just going to bring this up so you can see me find it. I think it's in here. Yes, it's in this. This is a very hacky way of creating a submenu that has a lot of downsides. Don't use this in production. It's meant to show off using a Svelte portal and hoisting a menu. And then later on, I say, end of relevant code. The rest of this is a very hacky submenu implementation. Since you might not trust me when I say don't do this in production, here are the known downsides to this approach. This menu being out of document order means their tab order is wrong. Keyboard navigation is buggy. Once in submenu, you can't get out. Screen readers will not be able to tell the user there is a submenu. Seriously, this one point alone is a deal breaker. It means vision impaired users cannot use this submenu. Clicking the More button causes the menu to close. Now that you know how terrible of an idea it would be to use this, if you decide that you will, and you file any bugs about it, I will point you to this note and be mad at you. So yeah, I do like to be cheeky when I write comments. When I write like the documentation for my code. But yeah, writing is cathartic, and I feel like writing for yourself gives you a certain level of like sense of achievement. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I feel like I would not get that same sense if I wrote something using an LLM. And I did, when I wrote that article that I never published, I did feel, actually, I think I did have it published for like a few days, and then I reread it and was like, I don't like this at all. And I unpublished it. But like after that, like rereading that article, I felt no attachment to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like when I read my own writing, I feel an attachment to that writing. I feel like this is a product of my own brain, and I view it as something that I did, something that I achieved. Even if it's bad, it's still something that I did. Like the documentation for Nymph is actually not very good. I definitely need to improve it, but it's still something that came out of my own brain. And when I look at something that an AI has written, even if I prompted it to do that, I don't feel that same attachment.
Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny when
I value writing as a way to create something and feel attached to that creation. And I know you feel that way about art. So you wouldn't feel like if you just made an AI generate some art, you wouldn't feel any attachment to it. Just like,
right.
I feel
it's a fun little
writing.
toy, right? It's a fun toy to make images with, but it's not really what I would call art per se. And when I use like Gemini to write stuff like this, I mean, doing the research, that was really helpful. And I think that it's all right. It didn't go through with a fine tooth comb to make sure that what it was returning to me wasn't hallucinated, but it doesn't seem to be from what I know. Right. That seems to be a really useful tool that it does. The actual writing part, when it tries to write a script, like the first thing I do when I get it done writing the whole script is just go through and remove all the stupid stuff that it adds to make it sound like somebody talking, like that just sounds really, really bad if somebody actually did it. And then I end up like going through a process of just like rewriting it over and over again until I get it to adding stuff, removing stuff, getting it to where I really want it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like at best, I would say AI should be used to generate a first draft.
Yeah.
But yeah, if that's your final product, it's bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really bad and really obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the other thing is like I was saying before, these places where it's supposed to be a professional writer producing a professional article and you read it and it's so obviously like Chat GPT.
Yeah.
It's like, because Chat GPT in particular has its own writing style.
Yeah.
And if you read something that was generated by Chat GPT, it should be obvious to you.
Right.
If you haven't messed around with Chat GPT, I could like it wouldn't be obvious to you. But I would encourage people to like actually go ask Chat GPT to write an article about something and just see how bad it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like the dumber an LLM gets, the worse its writing is.
Yeah.
So the one that I was talking about having done that conversation where it tried to convince me that Walt Disney invented the Matterhorn for Disneyland. That was done on, I'm going to bring this up here. It was called Llama 3.18B. I'm pretty sure this was it. I don't remember exactly, but I know it was a very small model because I was running it on a laptop that had like 4 gigs of VRAM.
Yeah.
And if you're unfamiliar with these LLMs, basically the 8B in here means 8 billion parameters. You can read like down here. It has different versions. There's 8 billion, 70 billion, 405 billion parameters. And that's kind of like how big its brain is, basically.
Yeah.
So if you go to download this one, you can see its brain essentially consists of these 4 files, and it's like a few gigabytes, like maybe 14 gigabytes.
Yeah.
It's not big. But if
Yeah.
you go to Llama 3 405B, I think it is. These are all the Llama 4 ones. Llama 3.1 405B. Oh, this is also FP8. That has to do with like quantization. There's like the number of parameters and how they're quantized. FP8 means you quantize it to an 8-bit floating point number, as opposed to like a 32-bit integer, or a 64-bit integer even. And it's a way to make it smaller. But like even this being quantized to an 8-bit floating point integer, look at how big this is compared to the other one. All of these files are what it takes, and they're all like almost 5 gigabytes.
Wow.
So like this, there's more. Oh my gosh, they just keep going. Look at that. Look at all of these files. Oh my god. That's so many files.
Yep.
And they're all like, 4 point something gigabytes. Except for this one at the end, 1.74. But anyway, so these the LLMs, the dumber they get, the smaller their brain gets, the worse their writing style will be. So if you took, Llama 3.1 405B and asked it to write an article, and you asked the 8B one to write the same article, the 8B one, the article would be so much worse. Which is surprising because like the 405B article would already be bad.
Yeah.
And I think the OpenAI one, I think their 04 model, which is like what I think you would interact if you did it today. I think that one is around 400 billion parameters. Maybe?
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly. It is like, it's not fully known, but like they kind of give hints about it.
Yeah.
And you can also just kind of compare these open source ones to the OpenAI ones.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that in article, it's easy to tell when somebody uses an LLM to at least partially write an article. One of the other big tells, besides like some stuff of trying to sound natural, is like it uses M dashes everywhere.
Oh yeah,
that was like the big one. And
I don't understand that. Is that something that a lot of people do? Why does it do that?
I don't know if I've ever read an article that or something that had more than like maybe one M dash, and like these LLMs put it everywhere. I know Gemini does it. It did it in the script that I was writing. I'm like, why are there all these M dashes all over the place? But the other weird thing Gemini did, and I haven't heard anybody else talk about it, but I think this is specific for if you're telling it to write a script for a YouTube video, right?
Yeah.
And what it would do is it started like surrounding all these words throughout the script with stars, like the star character.
Okay.
And sometimes it was just like one star on either side, and sometimes it was two. And I don't think it ever did more than two. And it was all over it. I think what it was trying to do is like say that when you read this, you're supposed to emphasize this word or phrase. And like it was way too much, right? It was like all over the place. So like one of the pass throughs I did was just removing all the stars. So it wasn't there anymore, and removing all the M dashes.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever used an M dash in my life.
Yeah.
I use hyphens a lot, but like
right.
I would have to look up how to even type an M dash.
Yeah, it's like a special like character code to get it to show up or something.
Yeah,
right?
I don't even know how to do it. Like if you were forcing me to type an M dash, what I'd do is go to Wikipedia, look up M dash, and then copy and paste.
Yeah. And then I'm not even sure like what are the proper rules for using it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Why would you use that instead of a hyphen?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that either. At least I know when to use a semicolon.
Yeah.
That's like
Well,
the furthest I got in my English.
I'm not sure I know how to
knowledge.
do that.
Basically, you use a semicolon when you have a phrase that could stand alone as its own sentence, but you want to attach it to another sentence.
Okay. That's
You
good
do
to know.
not use it in place of a colon.
Right.
A colon and a semicolon are very different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is something that the Lonely Island made a song about semicolons, and they listed, all these things throughout the entire song where you'd use a semicolon, and at the end they go, "Oh no, these are all supposed to be colon," which is really funny because it's like you listen to the whole song and. Like if you understand how to use a semicolon through the whole thing, you're going, that's not where you would use a semicolon. And at the end, they're like, yeah, that's the joke. And you're like, oh yeah, okay, it's very funny.
Right.
Anyway, shall we stop it here?
Yeah.
All right.
It's a good place to stop.
Well, thank you for tuning in, everybody. I'm going to try and put this out on YouTube, and I think I'm just going to mark it as like 18 plus because Terrence Howard was being really gross in the beginning of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if they don't allow it, cut out that part and start with your article.
Well, I think
that's a very short part.
Yeah, maybe I could do like reading the article as another separate video that's not 18
That's true.
plus.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for sitting through this. Sorry about Terrence Howard being so gross in the beginning of this video. And yeah, check out another video next week, or check out any of our previous videos. I'm pointing backwards to indicate, the past, which is it was fun to learn that that's actually culture based. Some cultures point forward to indicate the past and point backward to indicate the future, which is interesting. Anyway, fun fact to end the video with. If you'd like to support us, you can do that at patreon.com/Echoplex. You can check out our other shows at echoplexmedia.com. And if you'd like to buy self-specific merch, you can do that at icecreamonahotdog.com. Check us out live at twitch.tv/sylphweed. Sylph like the mythical creature and weed like the stuff you smoke. Thanks for checking out the video. Remember to like the channel and subscribe to the video, and we'll see you next time.